Receiving a large inheritance naturally comes with mixed emotions. It can be overwhelming, but if managed correctly, it can set you up for life. My name's Kyle, and I'm an independent financial advisor from Sydney. In this video, I'll go over the 7 steps I'd recommend to a client who inherited $1 million. These 7 steps build upon each other, so make sure you stay until the end for my biggest tip. Now, of course, this can't be financial advice, and everyone's situation is different. Rather, these are just some guidelines that I'd recommend. So let's get started. So step 1, put the funds in a high interest savings account. Until you make a decision with the funds, you want to make sure that they're making as much interest as possible and put them into a high interest savings account. But you can head over to Kenstar or Finder or a range of comparison websites where you can Google what the best interest rate is. So a lot of these accounts paying the maximum interest rate might have different rules and introductory rates and different things like that. So just make sure that any account you sign up for is going to work for your situation. If you have a significant amount of cash as well, you might want to put consideration of the government guarantee of $250,000 per bank, or you might just go to a more reputable, larger bank. Number 2, speak to professionals. So number 1, I'd speak to an accountant, just have a really good understanding of the tax implications of the funds you receive, and if there's any assets that are still to be sold down, what the tax implications of selling those might be. And number 2, I'd suggest chatting to an independent financial advisor. You can find these on the PIFA or the CIFA directories, or just Google independent financial advisor. They'll often give an introductory meeting, so try and chat to 2 or 3 of them to make sure that they have the experience and technical capabilities that you need, as well as to make sure, just as importantly, that you gel with them. The larger and more complex the inheritance is, I'd say the greater need to chat to a financial advisor or accountant would be, just because there's more money on the table or more money to be left on the table. Number 3, learn about personal finance. Even if you're getting advice, I still think it's important to have a baseline knowledge of personal finance. There's loads of great resources and blogs out there. Probably my favourite is Passive Investing in Australia, and Reddit like Oz Finance and FI Australia are great as well. You'll learn a lot here, and probably just as importantly, you'll learn that you can't outperform the market, so don't try. Instead, just buy and hold low-cost diversified ETFs, and you do much better than the average investor. Number 4, establish an emergency fund. The size of your emergency fund will depend on your risk appetite. A general rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Keep these funds in a high interest savings account, potentially separate to any other savings that you might have. Number 5, make concessional contributions to superannuation. Your concessional contribution cap is $30,000 from 1 July 2024, but you can actually make additional contributions using carry forward contribution if you have them available. This strategy can be particularly useful if you have a year where your income is going to be higher, as you can get that bigger tax deduction in that particular year. But superannuation is always a balance between getting those tax benefits and the access, because you don't get access to them till 60. So it can be a good idea to, if you're not sure, to chat to your independent financial advisor or accountant to understand the implications. Number 6, buy a long-term home. By working with a financial advisor and understanding your situation, you should be able to get an understanding of how much you could afford to pay for a home, whilst leaving funds available to achieve any other goals that you might have. So this depends on your actual ongoing income. So if, for instance, you received an inheritance and you didn't want to work too much longer, that means that you might not be able to put a huge percentage of your inheritance into that home, because then you're going to need funds on the side to actually generate an income stream to support your living expenses. The first rule of thumb when buying a home is to make sure that you're going to be certain that you're going to live there for a long period of time. Property is very expensive to transact in terms of stamp duty and agent costs, so you're not going to want to buy a house and then, I guess, a few years later have to sell that house and then rebuy another one, because it's going to be an expensive exercise. You can, of course, buy a home and turn it into an investment down the track and buy another home and whatnot. If you're doing this, I just want to be a lot more careful that you're buying a home that has good investment characteristics. So for instance, it might be in a desirable location, and it might have like owner-occupier appeal, and it might not be in an apartment block with lots of supply and different things like that. So I'd just be extra cautious if you ever plan to turn it into an investment property. If it's a home that's going to be a long-term home for the next 30, 40 years, you can probably add a little bit more emotion to the transaction. So if you decide to buy a property, or you already have one, it's crucial that you structure the mortgage against it correctly. So if you receive an inheritance, you might have the cash to actually go and buy a property outright. But as per this video, I'd suggest probably take out a mortgage, and any funds that you would have otherwise used to put into that property, put it into the offset account, because this just gives you flexibility down the track. And this leads to my last step. Invest and consider debt recycling. Now, with any funds that you have left over after buying that home, you're going to want that to grow and build an income stream for you over the long term to meet your living expenses. If you have a mortgage against that home, it'd be crucial to do it via debt recycling. This is the most important tip for homeowners and can save you over $200,000 in tax. It involves converting the non-deductible debt against that home into tax-deductible debt. I've done a full video on this strategy, which you can find by clicking on the link on your screen now. If you're considering buying a home, or you already have one, I'd highly recommend watching this video, because it could save you a lot of unnecessary tax. To summarise, number 1, put the funds in a high interest savings account. Number 2, speak to an accountant and an independent financial advisor. Number 3, educate yourself about personal finance. Number 4, establish an emergency fund, potentially 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Number 5, make concessional contributions to superannuation. Number 6, purchase a home. And number 7, invest. And if you have a mortgage, debt recycle to make it tax efficient. So that's about it for this video. I hope you found it useful, and if you've received a large inheritance, I wish you all the best of luck in managing it. And if you're interested in the video on debt recycling, which is one of my favorite tax strategies, you can click on the link on your screen now. Please subscribe if you're interested in more Australian personal finance tips. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.